Hi students, after a week time we are here to meet again. I am very glad to see you all through this session. This is Nageswaran welcoming you to the English e-learning program. So far we have discussed the prose and supplementary of third unit. So the remaining part of third unit is the poem titled Lines Written in Early Spring by William Wordsworth. Let us start this session with the introduction of the poet William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth was born on 7th April 1770 and died on 23rd April in the year 1850. He is one of the major literary figures of all times in the history of English literature. Wordsworth collaborated with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, that is S.T. Coleridge, in Preface to Lyrical Ballads, marking the start of the Romantic era. William Wordsworth's works are enjoyed by both youngsters and adults, and he surely remains as one of the most important and favored poets. In 1843, he became England's poet laureate, a position he held for the rest of his life. You know the meaning of poet laureate. He is a person who has been officially chosen to write poetry for the country's important occasions. We can otherwise call him a person whose poetry is considered to be the best or most typical of their country or region. This poem, Lines Written in Early Spring, is in a form of a ballad and consists of 6 quatrains. Ballad means a song or poem that tells a story. Quatrain means a poem or verse of a poem that has 4 lines. Thus, this poem has 6 quatrains, that is 6 stanzas. Each stanza contains 4 lines. In this poem, Wordsworth expresses his appreciation of the beautiful nature and his concerns regarding the path in which the humanity is leaning towards. Right. Let us see the nutshell of the poem now. The poem narrates the feelings of a poet towards nature and the lesson which he has learnt from it. The poem is set in a landscape of beauty, a small woodland grove. Wordsworth was inspired into writing this poem when he was walking near a village of Alford. Alford is a small village in Lincolnshire in the country of England. Dear students, there is another city named the same, that is Alfred, in the country of United States. Now we are talking about the village named Alford in the country of England. Right. So the setting of the poem can be associated with the beautiful scenery of Alford. Let us move to the poem now. The first stanza starts thus. Let me read it and you can just follow it. I heard 1,000 blended notes while in a grove I sate reclined, in that sweet mood when pleasant thoughts bring sad thoughts to the mind. The term I refers to the poet William Wordsworth. Throughout this poem, the poet William Wordsworth narrates his own experiences with nature. thousand blended notes is a phrase which means a thousand mixed musical notes of nature, and it also implies an almost pervasive presence of the natural, something that is akin to the omnipotence shown by the God. Sat means the absolute form of the past verb sat, 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 and it is the simple past of the verb sit. Reclined means to sit or lie in a relaxed way with your body leaning backwards. Through these two lines, the poet tells that while he sat in a reclined position, that is, leaning back in a resting position on a woodland forested area, he heard a thousand mixed musical notes of nature. In the third line, he says that in that sweet mood when pleasant thoughts bring sad thoughts to the mind. In that sweet mood, that refers to his feeling, the happy thoughts also remind him of sad thoughts. Here, he refers to the changes that society has undergone around him as sad thoughts. That means, whenever he feels very happy about the nature, simultaneously it brings sad thoughts to his mind. He tells the reason of his sad thoughts in the following lines. The second stanza goes like this: to her fair works did nature link the human soul that through me ran, and much it grieved my heart to think what man has made of man. Her refers to nature. To understand this line, we have to do some changes. Look at the verb pattern in the first line. Did nature link? The verbs used here are did link. Now combine these two verbs. Did plus link is equal to linked. Now read it. To her fair works, nature linked. Next line. The human soul that through me ran. Now bring the verb ran and place it between that and through. Now read it. The human soul that ran through me, and much it grieved my heart to think what man has made of man. In the first two lines, the poet appreciates the nature for her godlike abilities of linking a human soul to herself. Nature's soul is not that different from humanity. In the next two lines, he feels very sad while thinking about how cruelly man has separated himself from Mother Nature. Wordsworth states one of his principal philosophies here. It is man's innate state, that is, inborn state, to be close to nature. The second quatrain, that is, the second four lines, move briefly away from nature to reminisce on the misery that other humans have caused each other since time immemorial. The poet, however, takes a moment to state that nature is linked to humanity through the very idea of a soul, that nature's soul is not that different from humanity, and that although it has been forgotten by the rest of the world, it is man's natural state to be close to nature. This was one of Wordsworth's principal philosophies, that it was man's innate state to be close to nature. In this stanza, we must understand one more thing, that the poet uses the term works in the first line, that is, the works of nature. Generally, the term work has no plural form in sense 1. That is, if you want to use the term work to indicate job, task or employment, it doesn't have a plural form. We should not say homeworks, schoolworks and classworks. Likewise, we should not say I have a lot of works. We should say I have a lot of work. But in sense 2, the term work has plural form. That is, in order to indicate your book, music or art, we can say works. We can say works of Shakespeare, a complete works of Leonardo da Vinci, the complete works of A.R. Rahman. So, in sense 1, the term work has no plural form. In sense 2, the term has a plural form. Right, we can switch over to the third stanza now. Let me read the third stanza now. Through primrose tufts in that sweet bower, the periwinkle trailed its wreaths, and it is my faith that every flower enjoys the air it breathes. Primrose is a small wild plant that produces pale yellow flowers in spring season. Tufts means a number of pieces of grass growing or held closely together at the base. The bower, you know the meaning of the term bower? It means a pleasant place in the shade under trees or climbing plants in a wood or garden or yard. Periwinkle means a small plant that grows along the ground. Trailed is the simple past form of the verb trail. Here, the letter E is hidden by using the apostrophe. Right. Trailed means to grow or hang downwards over something or along the ground, or to move downwards over something. Wreaths mean an arrangement of flowers in the shape of a circle, traditionally hung on doors as a decoration or worn on the head as a sign of honor. In the first two lines, the poet says that in the pleasant shady place through green primrose bunches trailed periwinkle plants in the form of wreaths, that is, in the form of circles. In the next two lines, the poet says that he has a faith or strongly believes that every flower enjoys every ounce of the air it breathes. They are thankful for living besides the nature. That is why he says it is his own faith that every flower enjoys the air it breathes. Here, the presence of nature as a living thing strikes again, this time in the moment verbs used, that is, trailed for the periwinkle, breathes for the flowers. Throughout this poem, Wordsworth does his best to create the idea of a living, breathing world that is only a fraction removed from humanity. We are in the fourth stanza now. It starts like this. The birds around me hopped and played. Their thoughts I cannot measure, but the least motion which they made, it seemed a thrill of pleasure. Hopped is the simple past tense of the verb hop. It means to move by jumping on one foot. Here the poet says that the birds around the poet sang, hopped, that is jumped, and played. He is in surprise of these creatures. He cannot measure their thoughts of joy. Though the poet does not understand their language and ways, he does recognize that the birds are creating all these movements out of sheer pleasure and joy. Once more, the presence of movement draws a stark contrast with the immobile poet. It is nature that draws the reader's attention. So much has been said about it that it renders the speaker nearly a non-entity. He has no presence in the poem, no thoughts, no personality, no ideas. His world is subsumed by the stronger one of nature. The fifth stanza goes like this. The budding twigs spread out their fan to catch the breezy air, and I must think, do all I can, that there was pleasure there. Budding means producing buds. Twig means a small, very thin branch that grows out of a larger branch on a bush or tree. Breezy means a kind of wind blowing quite strongly, having or showing a cheerful and relaxed manner. Here, the poet conveys that the growing small leafless branches, that is, the budding twigs, spread out because they want to catch the flowing breeze which is sweet and light. And the poet must think that what he could do, that there was pleasure there. That is, all that the poet can do is to gather pleasure in their existence. He notices that the twigs or the newborn branches expand to catch the breezy air, and he believes that twigs are enjoying the breeze and mentions that there is pleasure hidden there. Finally, he says that there is a pleasure in realizing Mother Nature. We are in the last stanza now. If this belief from heaven be sent, if such be nature's holy plan, have I not reason to lament what man has made of man? Here, the poet says that if it is a belief sent by heaven that it is the holy plan of nature, then he has to feel sorry. That is why he mentions the term lament. Lament means feel sorry about something. And he questions that if this is heaven and this is the holy plan of nature, then what has man made of man, that is himself and his kind of separating from such joy? The poet's spirits are still lamenting, that is feeling sorrow about the miseries of the human world. He states that the human soul is left behind to experience the misery of the human world. Now, we can understand the poet's thoughts while comparing nature with human behavior. That is, the poet realizes that nature is a beautiful holy plan of God sent from heaven. Nature is linked to every human soul, but human beings have separated themselves from nature and have failed to realize the pleasure in Mother Nature. Thus, the poet ends his poem with the lament that was mentioned earlier. Have I not reason to lament and what man has made of man? Throughout the poem, there was the attempt by nature to heal the injured soul of the speaker, that is the poet. Near the end, despite the best efforts of nature herself, the speaker's spirits are still melancholy, that is sad and low, thus negating, that is, stopping the healing effect that Wordsworth claimed nature possessed. It ends on a somber and a sad note. The world of nature, untouched by the miseries of humanity, continues on while the human soul, bound in its rigid cage of mortality and reason, is left behind to experience the misery of the human world. Dear all, we know that the themes of this poem, lines written in early spring, are nature, spirituality, and peace. Throughout this poem, the poet, who is very likely the speaker, observes the natural world around him. He discusses how impactful the images of nature are on his state of mind. He was in a sweet mood, but this pleasant mood leads him to deeper thoughts, those associated with the nature of humankind and what has become of the human soul or spirit. He mourns over what man has done to man in the face of nature, which contains all of us. The speaker knows that although he does not have answers to many of his questions, he can take pleasure from the world around him. Let us see the figures of speech used in this poem. Wordsworth uses many literary devices in this poem. Personification is the most common of the literary device used here. In the stanza 2, line number 1, he says, "To her fair works did nature link." The figure of speech used in this line is personification, because nature is personified to link the human soul to herself. In the same stanza, in the line 2, he says, "The human soul that through me ran." In this line, the same figure of speech, that is personification, is used, because the soul is personified that it runs. In stanza 3, in line number 3, he says, "And it is my faith that every flower." Here also, the figure of speech used is personification, because flowers are personified to enjoy the air they breathe. In stanza 1, line number 1, he says, "I heard 1,000 blended notes." Here, the poetic device used is onomatopoeia, because there is a diversity of vowel sounds and a choice of cluster of consonants in the lovely phrase, 1,000 blended notes. In the last stanza, in the last line, he asks a question, "What man has made of man?" Here, the poetic device aphorism is used, because it is a statement that is presented efficiently by the poet. And as this line functions as a question, we can call it a rhetorical question. So, the another figure of speech employed in this line is rhetorical question. Dear students, after recalling the summary of this poem, we can wind up this session. Lines written in early spring is a landscape poem that is largely concerned with nature. The poet sits under a tree and thinks about nature and its beauty. His thoughts turn briefly to the misery of man and to the miseries that they work on each other. The poet tells that while sitting reclined, that is in a resting position, on a woodland grove, his mind was filled with several thoughts. While he finds solace in the nature's beauty, the same beauty also reminds him of bad thoughts. He appreciates the nature for her godlike abilities of linking a human soul to herself, but he also feels grief while thinking about how cruelly man has separated himself from Mother Nature. He is highly appreciative of the nature's beauty. He finds delight in the green bowers and has a faith that the beautiful flowers enjoy every ounce of the air they breathe. They are thankful for living besides the nature. The poet observes the birds which sing, hop, and play around him. He is in awe respect, that is, surprise of these creatures. Though he does not understand their language and ways, he recognizes that the birds are creating all these movements out of sheer pleasure and joy. The breeze flowing is sweet and light. The twigs spread out as if to catch the sweet air. And all that the poet can do is to gather pleasure in their existence. He questions in the end that if it is a belief sent by heaven that it is the holy plan of nature, then what has man made of man by separating himself and his kind from such joy? It ends on a somber, that is a sad note. The world of nature, untouched by the miseries of humanity, continues on while the human soul, bound in its rigid cage of mortality and reason, is left behind to experience the misery of the human world. My dear students, though the poet has described nature beautifully, throughout the poem it mainly highlights that man is destroying nature. He therefore concludes rhetorically, emphasizing that he has good reason to lament the distress man unnecessarily brings upon himself. Finally, I say that if you are in torture, go to nature, because nature is your best teacher. Dear all, I think you all have patiently watched this session and understood well from the very beginning to the end. And I am very happy about it. Thank you. Meet you in the next session. Thank you once again. Bye bye.